Good neighbors have good fences, but the best neighbors use virtual fence and help you use it too. Hey, I'm Shaye, and I host the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Today we are visiting with Jay and Cheyenne Smith about how they got started with virtual fence, but more importantly, how their group of neighbors have worked together to kind of get all on the same page and make it more cost effective for everyone involved. This is a really practical story. It's even an inspiring one to see how it has positively impacted their ranch and their neighbors as well. Remember to hit subscribe and leave a rating or review on whatever podcast app you're listening on. That doesn't only help me, that helps more ranchers find the valuable content like this that will help them improve their own operation. And I appreciate it so much more than you know. With that, let's visit with Jay and Cheyenne about how they are using Vence. Jay and Cheyenne, thank you for making time to visit with me. I know this is a busy time of year for you putting up hay, but I really appreciate, like I said, you making time to have this conversation about virtual fence and really your story of how you sought out how to make it more affordable for yourself and others.
No problem. Really nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So to kick it off, I would really like to learn more about your operation so that we can kind of set the picture for where you are applying this technology. So tell us a little bit more about kind of where you're located and what the bigger picture of your ranch looks like.
North and south, we are right in the middle of Idaho, but we are on the far eastern edge. So we're right on the Montana border and right on the Continental Divide. So if you can envision flat bottoms and steep peaks with a salmon river running through the middle of it, that's home for us and where we run our cattle operation.
And are you commercial? Are you seed stock? What's kind of your goal or orientation there?
We are very genetics oriented, and so we have had purebred cattle for over 20 years. We do also have some commercial cattle, so a little bit of both is how we run everything like a commercial cow, but we have registered data on a lot of our cattle.
Gotcha. And so what types of lands are you grazing? Is it predominantly public lands in your area? And then I'd also be curious, when is your calving season? Are you spring, or what's that look like?
Our area looks like irrigated meadows in the bottom that are privately owned. And then we summer on mountain range, which is BLM, Forest Service, and a little bit of Idaho State endowment lands. We spent 27 years calving in January and February. And 3 years ago, we switched. I think last year was the first year we were 100% switched. We calve in the fall now, predominantly September. And one of the reasons we were able to do that is virtual fence, to be able to run on public lands, still get our cattle gathered and change our calving season.
Awesome. I grew up calving in the fall, which is kind of odd when you're in a northern climate, as maybe you can relate to. So what challenges were you experiencing that maybe pointed you towards virtual fence as something you wanted to implement?
So the implementation of the virtual fence started before we decided to switch over to fall calving, and was actually pushed into full motion for us because of a massive fire on our range. It started while the cows are already on range, and we couldn't find them to get them off, and everything was a struggle that way. But then the next year on public lands, whether it's Forest Service or BLM, if there's a fire, you usually have a waiting period before you can go back and graze. And when we went up and looked around, the parts of the mountain that burned weren't necessarily parts that we graze. And so Jay reached out to the University of Idaho because they were already working with Vence and seeing how the technology worked in our terrain to see if we could do something so that we could get back out on range. And then I'll let Jake, it's his story, it was his brainchild.
We are a pretty intricate mix here of old-fashioned tradition and cutting-edge technology. And with that said, I've been fascinated by virtual fence since its inception. And so I'd been watching it, kind of studying it, kind of feeling out when the time might be right to jump in. And as Cheyenne said, after the Moose Fire of 2022 and 40 plus thousand of our best acres didn't burn, and the forest was going to tell us to stay home for 2 to 3 years, I thought if there was ever a sign that this is the time to go ahead and take that chance and jump in head first, that was it. And so we went ahead and, like Cheyenne said, we reached out to some partners, reached out to some funding sources, and we went to negotiating with the BLM and Forest Service to see if we could make this happen.
And how many years ago was that? You might have mentioned it early on.
2022, so this is season 4 of us with Virtual Fence.
Okay. And so initially reaching out to your university, that opened the door for you to try it that first year, or were there other connections you made too?
I guess I should mention that the University of Idaho Research Ranch is our fence line neighbor. So we work with them a lot just from day to day. And so we kind of know what they're up to.
So on one of our other allotments, they were going to implement virtual fence for a riparian management study that same year. And so I knew we were going to start using it a little bit that year anyways. And so I just reached out and rapidly expanded it. And then they did a post-fire grazing study in addition to their riparian management study over those same times. So they took on a lot more, we took on a lot more, and made it work.
So were you the only producer who wanted to try virtual fence after this fire, or did you have other neighbors who were also interested in the technology and wanted to get started around the same time?
I mean, to make the deal with the Forest Service and the BLM after the fire, we had to have all of us with collars on, and I think I'd say that Jay had to talk them into it.
Not very hard, though, because they were able to use their permits and they wouldn't have been able to use them without it. So I think once we had the mechanism and got the wheels greased and got it ready to go, there are 5 permittees on that allotment, and the buy-in came pretty easily once we had the mechanism in place. And they're all still currently using it.
So would you say the main hesitation was that initial financial investment, or when you say you had to talk them into it, was there something else they were hesitant about?
Mostly, and with the people here and with people that we've talked to other places, the hesitation is in the information being used against them more than anything. I don't think anybody has a problem with being able to find their cows, but they worry about information being used against them because cows are cows and they go where they want to go. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people were worried that it was going to take their job away from them. People like me that like to ride and like to go out and find where the cattle are.
This statement might be a little blunt, but the government doesn't like to try new things. And so that was our single biggest obstacle, was reassuring them that we could put enough sideboards on it to protect them in allowing us to try it. In the initial conception of the idea, the government was our biggest obstacle, and not that they were an obstacle, not that they were trying to be in the way. It just, they hadn't tried it before, and there's a lot of mechanism involved there, and it took some ironing and some planning and some logistics to make the powers that be comfortable with making a firm decision that would allow us to then make the investment in money, time, labor to put it to fruition.
I can understand that. Yeah. Now, Cheyenne, you made the comment people like you were a little worried it might take your favorite jobs away, of that riding, seeing where the cows are, pasture checks. How has that gone for you since implementing it?
The first year was just outstanding. I still got to ride whenever I wanted to ride, but I knew where I was riding. I could take salt out or go out and check water sources where the cows were. It was the first time ever that we knew where the cows were. And it also allowed us to bump them to some places where we knew there was better grass and just watch them and move along with them. I was able to do a lot more actual work instead of what we call emergency rides. Before the virtual fence, I'd say I was going out 5 times a week because cows were in somebody's yard, because cows had crossed the river and were on the highway. I mean, it's a huge range and there's a lot of different things that can happen. And those were just the cows that I knew about. So it took away the emergency part of it. Not that we still don't have emergencies, but I can see them coming now. I don't have to wait for a frantic phone call.
Jay, what's your perspective on how it's impacted what used to kind of be the day-to-day ranch work of grazing and managing cows?
So what it's done for me, where we run irrigated ground and put up our own feed, it's allowed me some freedom to get that done more efficiently, because I'm not jumping off my tractor and jumping on my horse to go take care of the emergencies when they pop up. It makes our range riding a lot more schedulable so that we can go make the moves we want to move, and we can have the crops timed so that that's not an inconvenience to be able to go do that. And therefore, it's made it a lot more enjoyable, both the crop work and the range management work, because you aren't just adding stress to stress. You're actually able to schedule jobs and do them at the appropriate times.
Awesome. Now, when we're looking at the system of Vence itself, it's the collar, and then you need a physical base station or tower. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you in a position where neighbors can share a tower, or does everyone kind of have to have their own because the country's big enough for that?
There are several base stations, but we all share them, and not only share them on one range, but because of the way the two mountains work, we're able to cross cover both mountains. And so some of the base stations are on the east mountains and covering the west mountains, and vice versa, to cover all the little dips but no, we are collectively sharing the base stations, and then every producer has their own collar sets. But with us being in a study, all that information is on one page. I can see everybody's cows right now because we're in a study or a clinical trial, or we're gathering lots of information.
Was that part of any hesitation too, or were neighbors pretty receptive to that, of everyone being able to see where each other's cows are?
Half of those neighbors are family, and the other half we work with them anyway, because the cows go out. There's no separation between the cows, so we work together all the time, or as much as possible, to help each other anyway. So that's not really an issue.
Were there any other collaborative efforts that you think are important to highlight about this process and how you got started? Because it is a little different than some people who just decide to use this technology on their own.
We had a ton of people step up and help us, and I think it's really important, A, to acknowledge all the help that we got in the state, but also so that people know that they can ask for help, to reach out to the organizations that they're a part of, and or to become parts of organizations so that you can get that kind of help.
Above and beyond the University of Idaho and our federal partners, the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service, I would sure like to give a shout out to Idaho Department of Agriculture's range program. Stepped up and helped us a lot. The Western Landowners Alliance has been a fantastic partner, and the Idaho Cattle Association.
So if it's okay with you two, I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about how you felt that first year of training and onboarding went. Did you feel it was a pretty smooth transition right away for how to use the technology, or were there any hiccups that you think you want other ranchers to be aware of, so hopefully they can avoid them on their operation?
I think that when we started this, that Vence was just ramping up. And so between year 1 and year 2, and even this year, they've implemented a lot of change. So every year kind of feels like a little bit of a new year. But the basic implementation of having a virtual fence and seeing where your cow is, even if the cow gets out of the fence, it was fascinating. I mean, we catch ourselves just looking them up on our phone or on the computer in the morning, just as part of our daily conversation of, well, okay, that's where they are. And maybe that's just because we like the information, but
I would say what we learned year one, we learned a lot of things, but probably the big takeaway is thinking you know how your cows use a range versus knowing how your cows use a range is two very different things. And probably our biggest learning curve was where to put fences so that we weren't interrupting natural movements, natural trails. For an example, the very first fence, we were on the BLM, so we put the fence on the BLM boundary. Well, there was a gradient that they had to touch a little bit of Forest Service to get to a water trough, and we had struggles with that. And once we saw what the issue was, adjusted the fence a little bit to let them have their natural trail. Everything flowed, everything worked great. We've kept using that for years since then.
Yeah.
So those lessons, if anybody was out to start it for the first time, I'd tell them to definitely give some of that some thought and maybe reach out to somebody that's done it before and see if you can save yourself some growing pains.
Yeah, with as steep as our country is, we actually went in and sent pins as I was riding on trails that I knew that they used to make sure that my fence was far enough off of those pins to not slow down where they wanted to go naturally, because you can look at a map and think you can see the trails, but you can't actually. It's a lot different on the map than it is out on the hill.
So can you go back and look at your history of fences and then make note of, avoid this is the one that worked better, etc.?
Yeah, the first couple of years, the university kind of built the fences and we went in and helped them. And so I know that they've cataloged old fences and got rid of the ones that didn't work, but you can actually see in the progression as the fences are made why it was improved in the title of the fence. Actually, I don't know for sure if you can go in and reuse a fence from a year before. You can copy them and then alter them however you need to. So it works pretty smooth that way. This is the first year that I've had control of building our fences and moving our herds from one group to another and all the computer and the techie stuff. This is the first year I've gotten control of that. The first couple of years we were just maintaining our cattle and working with the university on the tech stuff. So.
Okay. You've touched a little bit about how maybe grazing has shifted because you've learned more about the natural movement of your cows, but is there anything else you want to share about how grazing plans have updated, etc.? I know you were working around the fire that first year, but since then, how have grazing plans adapted?
Well, big picture, I would sure just like to talk about improved utilization. Being able to have the cattle stay where we put the cattle and then have them move and actually be gone for the rest of the grazing season to pasture number 2 instead of just repeatedly coming back on themselves or moving themselves too soon. Our utilization has been unbelievably fantastic. I mean, we're supposed to be on the BLM for 2 weeks and then go to the Forest Service, and we were constantly hitting 45 or 50% utilization because we couldn't ever keep 100% of the cattle off of it later in the season. Now that we can, we're 4 years in a row of 4% utilization on our BLM. So now we're starting to have the conversation of, oh, we might have to rethink this permit structure because the utilization is so low.
Tell me more about how virtual fence allowed you to shift to a fall calving scenario when you used to calve in, you said January and February, correct?
Yeah. So normally we'd go out to range in May, and we still do. But by this time of year, mid-July to August, the cows go all the way over the top of the mountain into the high meadows. But with us fall calving, we would want our cows to start coming home. Actually, we want our cows right now to start coming home. And because the cows spread out on the whole mountain and intermingle with the other groups, people will be pushing their cows up and they'd be pushing our cows over. With the virtual fence, I've been able to keep my cows in smaller pastures and move them kind of like a puzzle piece on the side of the mountain I want them to, and then away from everybody else's cows. So as they go over the top, ours can kind of shift towards the bottom and not go over the top, so we can actually bring them home. We would have not been able to use that range with fall calvers if it weren't for the virtual fence, because the cows would calve on range, which doesn't sound horrible, except for we have a huge wolf population, and the wolves would be happy because they'd have lots of little baby calves to eat, but we don't want that, obviously.
So even before we changed our calving season, the single most inefficient part of our range was the fall gather. The country is so big and so steep that we spend months getting our cows home because we don't know where they are. And so now with GPS location and virtual fencing, our gather is much more efficient. And once we gained that efficiency, then we gained the confidence to change our calving season, knowing that we could get them home in a timely fashion and make a change like that work.
What benefits have you seen from shifting your calving season to the fall compared to that winter season?
The amount of labor and time that we put into the operation, especially as we age up, we're both in our 50s, the labor intensity was getting to where we either needed the next generation to step in full time or we needed less work. And this has allowed us, with the virtual fencing and with the fall calving, it's allowed us to maintain the size of our operation, which is the two of us and sometimes two of our children, and not need extra help and still be able to do it all.
Have you found that you have less instances of calving difficulties and improved health too with the calves?
Oh, that's been really interesting.
Calving was a 24-hour-a-day job for people, and now it's a 2-hour-a-day job, and I do it myself. And Cheyenne comes and helps me tag. I mean, it's dramatically decreased our calving labor.
I guess from your two's perspective, is there an important part of your experience that we haven't talked about today that you think is valuable for other ranchers to learn from?
I know that a lot of people want to know about the price point and where we got help, how we can have a valid input on that. But after the first year, we did the price point and we worked it all out, and the cullers saved us so much money just in fuel and vehicle maintenance that it really does pay for itself. The investment is well worth it. And the people at Vence have been fantastic as far as help and having good people around to answer questions, to help with troubleshooting. And then, of course, we had the university who were learning the whole process too, and they've been excellent. I know a lot of people don't ask for the tech help, and I definitely would ask for the tech help because the whole program is fairly simple and easy to use, but also can be frustrating because computers are frustrating.
Quality of life. I was pretty burnt out of emergency riding while trying to farm, and that had a shelf life to it, and I was about to the edge of that shelf life, and this technology allowed me to enjoy range riding again because we can schedule it.
Yeah, and you can't really put a value on getting that enjoyment back.
Yeah, no, it really truly was huge. And it wasn't just the scheduling, it was that when we went out all day, we actually went and got the cows that we needed to, and not have to go back 5 or 6 more times because we rode to the wrong area with our whole crew. I mean, it is scheduling, and that's important, but it's actually getting the job done when you go out to do it instead of finding yourself on an all-day trail ride, which I don't care either way, but when you have hay and other stuff to do, apparently that makes us angry.
There were times, virtual fence, that we went out in the fall, rode for 3, 4, 5 days in a row, and brought home 7 to 12 cows. Not very efficient. And there's other ways to spend your time. And it's not that we didn't enjoy riding or enjoy our time together, but when you're talking about the efficiency of the operation, that was a huge inefficiency. We were just burning time and money in the fall.
And in case you can't hear it in his voice, that was not enjoyable to him. No matter how much he says he enjoyed it, he did not. But he does now. We can go out and we can have a nice day riding, and it's very enjoyable. So,
Cheyenne, I want to circle back. You talked about how you have a high wolf population in your area where you've got your cows at anyways. Has virtual fence opened your eyes to any predation activity? Or I know some people have used it to even submit insurance claims if an attack has happened. Has it helped you in any way on that front?
I know that we had a couple instances in the last couple of years where if you're watching the grazing patterns, in the evening you can see where the cows are, and in the morning somebody would get up and check and the cows would be a long ways from that. And you can go back in through the grazing data on Vence and kind of see how quickly they moved. And so, yes, you could pinpoint an instant where something happened. And one time it was predation by wolves, and I think they found 2 calves. And then the second time was a helicopter exercise. They were doing some sort of heli-repeller thing, and it just scared the cows. So it's not always predation, but if you're watching your cows and you can tell that they've moved a long ways, and then you can look up the grazing data and actually see how fast they moved, and actually just have the pinpoint, the GPS location of where it happened, you can go look, which we'd never had before. Anytime there's predation, it was because we stumbled across it. There was no way of knowing otherwise. It's a huge amount of information, and you can use it a number of ways.
Before this technology, the only tool we had was to count how many didn't come home. That was the only tool we had. And now we've learned a lot about animal movement and animal behavior. This is still rough country for compensation just because it's hard to find animals in time. But we've learned a lot. It's helped us.
And how many months out of the year are your cows collared?
So we put the collars on
About 7.
mid-April. Yeah. Normally they wouldn't come off until we came home in the fall in the range, but we're going to leave them on even though we'll be home to start calving, just to kind of keep them in the pastures.
And so what does the next generation think about this technology?
I think they like it. I know that my son's addicted to, he has the app on his phone. He might be he's away right now. He might be looking at it in Ohio while he logs trees just to see where the cows are. But it's kind of addicting, like most phone apps are. It just can kind of pull it up and see where the cows are. I don't think they have any problem with it at all. It's been very helpful.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was almost more encouraging for them to get involved or anything like that, because new technology excites me as that rising generation. Yeah.
Our youngest is 17 and has just in the last couple of years been more actively participating in the management of it, not just showing up and riding. So she probably doesn't know without the technology. I mean, she was there when she was little, but she was riding her pony. She didn't care about the cows. So I know that they like it.
Yeah, as of lots of technology for young people, it might just be the new normal.
Okay. Well, as we wrap up today, if listeners remember one thing from our conversation, what would you like that to be?
Well, just as a virtual fence user that started early in the process, I would just say I do definitely recommend people look into it. I recommend people use it, but I also recommend that they reach out to people like us that have tried it and learn a few of those tips and saved yourself a few of those initial growing pains.
We've over lots of discussions with everybody that we are in this study with and the university and just talking to other people. I think it's really important that this is not a hands-free management device. It gives you a lot of information, and not just where your cows are. You can print out heat maps. You can print out movement patterns. If you have one cow that ends up somewhere weird, you can actually follow her as she goes there to see why she went there, if she was chased. there's so much information, but it's not hands-free. You can't just throw your cows out on range and forget about them. So what we like to tell people and what we pride ourselves in is that if you're a good cow manager anyway, this just ups the level of your good management practices. It's still important to be very active in managing your cows. It doesn't do it itself.
If you want to turn them out and pretend like they're not there all summer, you'll hate this technology because it will tell you where they are.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right, folks, if you're listening to this conversation, I will make sure there's a link to Vence down in the description. And remember, the best way to support this podcast and all your other favorite podcasts is to leave a rating or review and share it with another rancher who's going to find this information valuable. And with that, happy ranching, folks.